everybody, and welcome to another great episode of My EdTech Life. Thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful Tuesday evening, or it may be well into Wednesday, depending on where you're joining us around the world. I just want to say thank you so much for making us part of your day, making us part of your listening or viewing pleasure, whether you're going to catch this episode right now live or catching it on the replay, as well as, of course, the video on YouTube. Thank you so much, as always, for all of your supports. Thank you so much for all the likes, shares, and follows. And for all of you that are new subscribing to our YouTube channel, I want to say thank you so much. We recently had 500 subscribers. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, guys. So please make sure that you share our YouTube channel. Please, if you haven't done so yet, please make sure that you go ahead and subscribe and give us a thumbs up on the videos. We definitely appreciate that. That goes a long way into helping us continue with our mission of connecting educators and creators one show at a time. And I am excited about today's show. We have an amazing guest, and we're going to definitely dive deep into this conversation because our guest tonight, Mr. Maxwell Roach, has an amazing story. As I was reading his bio and just kind of taking it in, I mean, this is going to be a wonderful conversation. So I definitely want to welcome Maxwell Roach to the show. Maxwell, how are you doing this evening?
I'm great, Fonz. How are you doing today?
I am doing wonderful. It was a wonderful day. And then, of course, to end the day on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon here in Texas. And then, of course, with a wonderful conversation connecting with you definitely makes it that much better as well. So thank you so much for joining me. And thank you so much for asking. So Maxwell, let's go ahead and dive in. And as you know, if you're familiar with the show, I always love to start this show with that superhero origin story. And as you know, every guest that comes onto the My EdTech Live show is somebody that is doing some wonderful, wonderful work within the education landscape or the creator landscape. And so I liken them to that superhero. And as we know, that superhero always has an origin story. So, Maxwell, I would love for you to go ahead and give us a little brief introduction, and then just let's dive into your origin story because I'm curious as to your journey through education. Was it something that you knew you always wanted to do, or was this something that kind of came in a little later in life?
For sure. Well, this is great, Fonz. And again, thank you for the incredible introduction already. I always love being on these podcasts where it's like, there's these streams where the hosts themselves are just so fantastic at it, just introducing the entire show and setting it all up, right? So it's always fantastic to be here. And again, to all the listeners and everything, I hope my goal is to always say at least something that can get through to somebody, right? Hopefully it's positive, right? That's always the goal. But, as we were mentioning, right, my name is Maxwell Roach from JonAyves Learning Club. Founded the company alongside my wife as well, which is really interesting. We were sort of, we had children, and that was pretty much the founding of the company, and I think that's sort of where it all really did begin. But of course, there's in-depth story behind all of it. But I think I love how you mentioned sort of the superhero side of things, right? And that sort of origin story, it's long and winding, and I really do. Some people may look at me like, oh, wow, this guy had no focus, but it brought me to where I am today, and it will continue to take me towards wherever I need to go, right? And it's really been fantastic just to be able to be here and just be in this education world now where I'm being accepted with open arms. Now, for those who don't know, myself, I did study. So I actually went into computer science out of high school, right? So I went into computer science, did some dabbling in there, and realized, not really too interested in doing that, right? So what ended up happening is my mom, she said, well, you know what? You can't just sit around the house doing nothing. This isn't going to work, right? Not happening. So effectively, what happened is she actually found a school for me across Canada. Right. So again, I'm in Canada. So I live in a city outside of Toronto, Ontario, but I lived in Toronto for years. Right. I also grew up in a city outside of Toronto, Ontario. But my mom said, you need to go and do something. So I think it was about 44 hours of travel. It was myself and both my parents. We were in if you can picture it, a Pontiac Sunfire. I don't know, maybe some listeners know what these are, yes. Right? Yes. White Pontiac Sunfire. At least it was 4 doors, which is great, okay. Right? Good. Now, I had everything in the car, though, right? Now, here's the thing. Where was I going? Well, I was going to music school, right? So I studied music for quite some time. So my mom found this school, and I just remember I have these vivid images of I'm sitting in the back seat of this four-door Sunfire. My parents are in the front. My dad is also a truck driver, right? He used to be a truck driver, so he could drive infinitely, right? And so I'm sitting in the back, and there's a keyboard that's pretty much leaning up against me. All of my luggage and everything, my whole life is beside me, and I'm just cramped in this back. I'm 17 years old, right, going across Canada, and it was great, right, really fantastic. And then so effectively, when I got there, I auditioned and everything, and I ended up getting into the school. But that was my first time ever being away from home. And what was amazing about that was that I was in this element that I'd never been in before, where it was hyper focused. Now, I don't know if I don't know, maybe there are some listeners that have been in that scenario where you're just in this hyper focused environment at all times, where everyone is thinking the same thing. And I've never, to this day, I would almost say, actually, maybe as of the last few months, I've re-immersed myself in such a hyper focused environment. But I don't think over the past, say, 10, 15 years, I've ever been in such a momentum driven environment where everyone is just feeling the same thing. Everyone was listening to the same music. Everyone was striving to be the best that they could in the music landscape. And I was training as a drummer at the time. I call it that it's my trade, right? So I was kind of working as a drummer and learning. And let me tell you, I didn't know much about the instrument in the beginning, but so my name is Max Roach. And for those, you can also check it out online. If you try to search for me,
Yes.
you're going to find a jazz drummer who pioneered the drums, right? So a lot of pressure, right, to say the least. So I better practice and become amazing at my craft, right? And I think, we'll dive even more into it as well. But that sort of was the beginning, understanding what it really meant to head towards mastery within a certain domain. Right now, I'm not the master of the drum set. It's not what it is, right? However, I did spend a lot of hours, right? I would be up in a practice room 8 o'clock in the morning, and I don't leave till 10 p.m., right? Maybe I have a class that I have to go to, right? But that's just what it was. And being in that environment, it really translated to when I moved into, of course, I traveled for years. I was able to perform, opening for artists such as the Rolling Stones, such as Beyoncé, lots of different artists, right? Just touring the world. And it was great. Now, what was really interesting is that I was able to find the connection between different domains. So going into the food industry, going into the tech industry, right? Going into education. So all of this really just stemmed from understanding that mastery. And here we are today, right? And of course, we'll talk much more about it, but that's sort of where it all started from, where it went through, and how we are here today. And with JonAyves specifically, once I had children, that changed the whole game. And I have my children, they were learning, we were doing long division since they were about 3-4 years old, right? So we kind of took that information and that strategy and made it into a business, right? And so everything just sort of started coming full circle, where, okay, well, how do I now train these children to approach mastery? So it was really interesting to see how it came full circle, and here we are today with a business that's working.
Excellent. And what I love about that story is just there's so much to it, and of course, I wasn't. Well, I was just a musician in high school, a little bit, outside of high school and playing with bands. So I know what you mean as far as talking about being hyper focused and making sure, especially in band when you have either competitions, and then of course, even just playing local shows. It's like our goal is to be the best that there is out there, and just practicing and making sure that you're able to adapt, of course, to the changing genres, and then of course the crowd and all of that. So I can definitely see everything that you spoke on, those connections. And to me, it just seems the way that you described it, just sort of like a natural flow right into what you're doing. And the fact that you had so many different perspectives, like you said, you tied, of course, the tech side, you tied, the music side, you tied, now here in the education space, you're seeing how all those worlds just really come together. And now you're full on and fully immersed into the education space. So let me ask you now, talking about JonAyves, I want to know where that motivation came from for you and your wife to go ahead and move forward with the JonAyves Academy. Was it something that you just kind of said, you know what, this kind of makes sense? Or did you just kind of say like, hey, let's go ahead and do this. I mean, we're teaching our kiddos how to do math, we're doing this, so why not bring this to the world? So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a little, it's one of those stories where when you look at it for what it was at the time and the actual decision to do it, it's not as glamorous until you actually look at the whole story behind it, right? And I think what makes it so interesting is that, again, we had children. So what this ended up doing for myself anyway, listen, children took me off the road. It stopped me from touring. I remember going home at nights from being wherever I was. Maybe I was playing at some club or something, or maybe I was on the road for a few weeks or whatever it is. And I'd come home and the house is dark, right? It's like, well, no one's here. And this is when we had our daughter. And no one's here. My wife has to go and needs help. So she's in another, at her mom's house, right? Getting help and all these things. And that really hurt me. Like it was tough for me at that time. So I needed to make a decision. I remember picking up the phone and calling, a bunch of the band leaders and calling other employers and whatnot and saying, well, listen, I'm done. I'm not playing anymore. And that was tough for me, right? It was what it was. So, but I needed to prioritize my children. And I think that was probably the first time that I had ever made a decision that was actually fully about someone else, right? Throughout this time, I'm practicing. I'm trying to be the best I can. I'm doing all these things and whatever. I'm trying to make some money. But it was like, I can't do this anymore because I have someone else to take care of, right? And I think that there was something very important about that actually led towards where we are today. So I actually, what ended up happening is I left that. I had no jobs lined up, right? I don't advise anyone to do this, by the way. This is just how my life works. I left an industry with no job lined up, right? So I was taking all kinds of jobs. I think I was like driving Uber, right? I was doing transcriptionist jobs. I type pretty quickly, but sometimes, just because you can do something quickly doesn't mean that your body can actually sustain it. So I started getting some issues in my arms and things like that. I was doing all kinds of things, right? I actually started a food business at that time as well, where I was selling ketogenic bread into grocery stores, right, across the greater Toronto area. So as you could imagine, I guess it's not a so seamless transition, or maybe it was for me going from music to food, but it was what it was, right? Again, you take the same skill sets and just apply it somewhere else. Sure, right? So I think that effectively what that ended up giving me was the confidence to sort of say, well, I can kind of do what I want. I actually have the ability to sell into stores based on my previous experience. So all of this ended up happening. And then I actually stopped making the bread because it came into the same situation where we had our second child and I'm just in the commercial kitchen all the time. It's like, well, I have my children. So I had to make that decision again to go and say, all right, I need to focus on my family. So I did that. And in that time, I actually moved into the tech industry. So I got hired into a multi-million-dollar tech organization. We were 6 people at the time. We were raising money. I was hiring people, taking people from Google, from Facebook, from Amazon. I was learning everything about deep learning and machine learning. I had no idea about any of this information, right? But hey, I was in a hyper-focused environment. That was another time that I was in one where everyone was just like, we need to make this product work. And I'm just wide-eyed. I'm like, this reminds me of school. Let's go. I'm ready to learn. So within all this, I'm learning about, the corporate side of things. I'm learning about just understanding how to run a business, because the CEO, I mean, he was my boss and we would travel the world together, administering scholarships to universities. So we were side by side for years. So I'm learning about everything. I'm learning how to negotiate. I'm learning all these things, right? How to speak to people and everything. So after kind of doing that, effectively, I said, you know what? I still need to do something that I feel is where my skill sets really shine, right? And throughout all this, what I realized is that we were raising our children, and our children were just able to do whatever, right? And my kids are 3-4 years old. They're doing all kinds of stuff, right? They're doing multiplication. We're doing double-digit multiplication. We're doing long division. We're doing whatever else it is. I'm not really thinking anything of it. I'm just applying process. That's it. But then I'm realizing that, I guess not all children do this, right? So interesting. So what I ended up doing was I actually ended up looking for a job within education. So I actually became the CEO of a childcare. And what ended up happening is I started learning about childcare. I started learning about early childhood education and the educators themselves and understanding that industry. And long story short there, it's kind of a short story. I was there for about a year and I said, this isn't for me. I need to take it and do it on my own, right? I want to have the children learning what my children are learning at the speed that I know that they can learn. So at that point, right, I then said, you know what, we're going to open our own business. We're going to start JonAyves Learning Club, right? And we're just going to move it forward. So we started it. This was April of 2000. Where are we? 23 right now. So this was last year, April of 2022, right? Post COVID, all this stuff. Well, kind of still in COVID. And so we said, we're going to open this, and we opened it and we said, let's go. We put up a billboard in our city. We were marketing. We were going to, all the moms groups that were available, marketing on Facebook, everything. And not one person showed up or signed up to our program. 0 people. I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't. I'm like, but wait, doesn't everyone want their children to learn? I didn't get it. Right. So that was a bit tough to swallow. So we're going through, and again, right, I leave industries and I don't have a plan, right? I'm just like, hey, you know what? My gut says let's go. And so I go. And so I'm sitting around, I'm like, I need money, right? I found some ways to make money, right? Legally, right? So, worked it out. And we sort of said, you know what? I don't know if we can do this. And just as we had said it, because it happens every time, right? There's one individual that we had met. We met them at a local YMCA. And she said, oh, do you tutor your child? Or do you tutor children? Because we see you working with your children all the time here at the YMCA. And I said, I mean, we kind of have a business, but, it was awful. It didn't work. And she said, well, can you at least tutor, my child? And I said, okay, sure. Like, let's do an assessment, I guess. I don't know. Let's just try something. And long story short, this individual actually has gotten me probably, I'd say 40% of my business just from her. And I'm eternally grateful for it, because then it becomes referral based and all these things, right? And then you start to grow it even more. And I found that, wow, we can actually make this into a curriculum. So we made a curriculum out of it, right? And then we started issuing certificates out of it. And then we just started to build it into its own brand, which was really amazing, right? And we have so many plans for it. Now, what we're doing, we're actually taking it and we're going into private schools, right? And we're going to private schools and we're saying, listen, we can actually work with your children virtually in 15-minute blocks, and we can make sure that they learn concepts. So we have schools that have onboarded all of these things. So I think that's kind of the journey of how we effectively ended up saying, you know what, this is what we're going to do. And listen, it didn't work at first, but you just keep moving. You keep moving forward. And it's always that time when it's like, I don't think it's going to work, when something swoops in and it just takes over. So I'm eternally grateful for just having the perseverance and just continuing to believe in it. And also having my wife just not, being too upset that I keep leaving industries and not having cash ready to go. But there's always money to be had. And there's always, as long as you follow what you're supposed to be doing, the cash will follow. And I'm, again, eternally grateful for just having that discernment to be able to move when it's necessary.
Yeah. And not only that, but again, going back to your experiences and then just really that entrepreneurial spirit of, and like you said it very well, during, this segment, but just the ability to use those skills that you had prior in whatever it was, whether it was the music and transferring those skills over to the bread making, and then transferring those skills over then to tech, and then now transferring those skills. And along the way, you're picking up more skills and solidifying, what you've already done, and then going into this and creating the JonAyves Learning Academy. And then, so tell me a little bit about the JonAyves Learning Academy. So for all our audience members that are catching us live or are going to be catching us on the replay, I know you mentioned, at this last segment about the curriculum. So, and again, this is just me, being in education for 16 years. And for someone that's coming in from various, backgrounds and industries, how was that for you, to kind of sit down and say, okay, we got to come up with a curriculum. Like, how are we going to go about this? So tell us a little bit about that journey.
Absolutely. Well, I think for starters, it was very interesting because I'm coming into the space as a completely new player. And this new player, being myself, is coming in sort of at a detriment. Reason being because I'm coming in saying, hey, I'm here to tutor. So here's the problem when you say that you're coming in to tutor, right? Many of the educators that I've spoken to, they don't really take too well to this because firstly, I'm not educated as a teacher, right? I didn't go to teachers college. I didn't do that stuff. I didn't study education in school, right? All of these things. So I'm coming in as some random individual that's saying I know what to do, right? I remember specifically, I had this conversation. This will stay with me forever. I had this conversation with a principal of a school, right? The school will remain nameless. And I actually was thinking that I wanted to go into his school, right? And say, hey, I have a few students from your school and they're having some issues. So right now I am tutoring them, right? Which tutor, I never want to use this word again, but it is what it is. So I'm tutoring them currently. Can I come into your school and tutor them instead of waiting until after school to tutor them? Because it's process wise. If I just go into the school, then the kids are already there, right? Easy, not a problem. I'm new to education, right? So I'm like, well, this seems to make sense. Easy for everybody. He's like, well, firstly, absolutely not. There's no way that you're making money with taxpayers' dollars, right? Secondly, our teachers are good enough. Meanwhile, I'm thinking, like, I only look for the result. So I'm thinking, well, why is it that they're coming to me? There has to be a reason why they're coming to me, right? And so this gentleman, he said, I have a question for you. So all I wanted to hear was no. I'm fine with no, right? It's like, you don't want me in the school, it's fine. All right, cool, whatever the reason is. But then he wanted to explore, right? So he said, I actually have a question for you. I said, okay, sure. What's the deal? And he said, what exactly are you doing as a tutor? Because I don't believe in tutors. I think tutors are frauds. I think that they're wasting people's time and it doesn't work. And so we had this conversation on it, right? And this isn't the first time that I've had this conversation, right? Over the year, I should say. But in this particular instance, it was one of my earlier conversations. And I had to really kind of bite my tongue because I'm here to learn. That's the biggest thing for me, right? Is that I need to learn. Otherwise, I can't move into industries if I don't know what's going on. So I needed to dig in and say, well, why is it that you feel that tutors don't work? And it's I don't believe that children should be working after school. They should be having fun, and we're doing enough in the school. We have pride in our teachers and all these things. And meanwhile, all I'm thinking in my head is they're coming to me. I'm not begging them to come to me. Right. So the parents are using their hard-earned dollars to find external education for some reason. You may believe in your program, but the result says that something is unbalanced. So I love balance checks, right? I love to figure out how do we make things work. That's all I care about. Right. So we had this conversation and I realized, I'm not welcome here. Right. It was interesting. But again, I love that. Right. That really helps me reframe and understand what direction to head in. So throughout this, what was interesting was, having these conversations and realizing that it was very difficult to get into schools, to talk with teachers and to really understand that, like, listen, we're on the same team. I'm here to help. So I started to dig into it, right? And I started to say, well, what exactly are we providing as JonAyves Learning Club? Like, what is it? Because our process is not just, this idea of tutoring. And what I started to uncover was that, well, this has to be personalized. Learning has to be personalized. There's no question about it. Listen, the biggest, most popular company, we're on YouTube right now, right? YouTube is personalized. TikTok is personalized. Instagram is personalized. All of these platforms that are pretty much running the planet at this point are personalized. So we need to understand that children and adults, but children, for the sake of this conversation, they need that one-on-one attention. So that's what I'm providing. I'm providing one-on-one attention. So this is where I'm starting to rebrand, and I've already rebranded to our instructors are now called personalized learning instructors, right? Or PLIs, right? So around this, there's two things. One, there's a licensing program that we're actually looking to create as well, like a certification. And then the second thing is the curriculum, like you're mentioning, right? So the curriculum itself is very specific. We have colors. So, we have white jam, JonAyves method is what we call it, right? So we have white jam, we have, and then it goes down through all the colors of the rainbow pretty much, right? And like white, orange, yellow, green, and so on. So at each level, you learn a different set of curriculum information, right? But however, the key to this curriculum is understanding what the child is interested in. And that's what I'm finding is what we're able to provide is, oh, you're interested in this? Well, we actually have instructors that are specifically know everything about music or specifically know everything about sports or whatever it might be, right? And I think that that's the interesting piece that is actually necessary for children to learn. Because listen, kids can learn anything. It's just if it doesn't apply to their life, think about it as an adult, right? Try learning something that you don't like. It's the worst experience, right? So we developed what we call the 3 L's, right? So in order to really understand and learn something, right? So the first thing you need to do before you even try to learn it, you have to actually love it. That's the first piece. So you have to love it. And then once you love it, then you can learn it. And then you go through the motions, right? Your practice, your repetition, whatever it is, which repetition is something that for some reason has been eliminated from a lot of institutions via homework. And I don't believe in this, but it is what it is. Another conversation I'm sure to be had at some point. And then thirdly, once you've learned it, then you can really live it, right? So that's kind of the 3 L's that we live by here at JonAyves, right? So it's really interesting. And once I see that children themselves, you start to tap into the things that they like, right? You know, kids love video games. So you start talking to them about video games, or you start talking to them about money. Everything opens up. I was just doing a lesson in a park actually yesterday with a student. He was 16, and he's going through compound interest and simple interest and all these things. And he has a test. I think tomorrow is his test, right? And it's like, man, so you don't understand the concept. He's like, yeah, I don't really get it. So we're going through it, and I realized that, wow, you actually don't even understand what interest is. And he's like, oh, I'm like, you realize it's just free money, right? He's like, oh, so you start to bring it into his world of understanding. And it's like, because I have that time to sit one-on-one with him, right? And then we can go over the basics, really get that foundation. So that's really the basis of our learning club, is understanding that it doesn't take very long for children to learn. You just have to apply it to their lifestyle. And it's the same with adults. Apply it to their lifestyle. So that's a lot of what the curriculum is around. It's a lot around what our certification is going to be around. And let me tell you, it takes a lot of time to create these things, right? But when you love to do it, again, I just sit with it. I remember I'm sitting in bed and I'm just writing this curriculum. I've got pages and pages of it. And then I need to make a nice little document, make it nice and colorful and whatever. But it was fun to do. Absolutely. And I think, for those who are looking to move into a certain field, again, don't start with the curriculum, but just start, go for it, right? Everything will fall into place as necessary, and the work will be enjoyable as it's needed, right? And that's what I found is the biggest understanding, I think, that I've learned, especially from music, that the work will be enjoyable as you approach and continue to move forward in the direction you're supposed to.
Love it. And I absolutely love that concept. And I agree with you. The concept of the 3 L's, which I absolutely love, which was love it, learn it, and live it. So my question to you is that, and going back to the situation where you had that principal that is just very skeptical of what it is that you're doing, the services that you're providing, and obviously not seeing that there is, an issue or something, or a gap to be filled, that these parents are coming to you and seeking your services, and they're being successful now. So I want to ask you, what are some ways, because you talked about personalized learning, and maybe just in the way that you run JonAyves Academy, and working with your I'm sorry, it was the learning
Oh, JonAyves Learning Club, of course.
well, the learning club, but you called the tutors. They weren't called tutors. They were called, what was it again?
Learning instructors, personalized learning instructors.
Personalized learning instructors. So by what means do the personal learning instructors, how do they get a student to love the subject, as it is, they're struggling within their regular classroom setting, and then of course they come to you to see that they're struggling with. So what are some ways to help with that? Because you did mention the personalized learning, and maybe if you don't mind sharing maybe like a little success story, just to see how the students can just really bounce back and understand those concepts.
100%. Absolutely. I can think of 1,000 stories already, right? I've got one in particular that's fairly recent as well. It's really interesting. So I think there are two things here that I can think of. One, there's the idea of how do you make the students actually love it, and then there's the other portion of when you have students that are in the classroom, how do they interact in the classroom, and what is the information that they're getting that they're struggling with, and why are they struggling with this information? So to start with the second one, and this is my belief, of course, I don't have scientific backing on this, but I just like to look at things from first principles. At the end of the day, when you have one person that is at the front of a room, or just in general, you just have one person that is speaking to 30 people, speaking to 20 people, speaking to 15 people, right? This person is speaking in one way. There are 15 individuals at minimum, right? That they may not even understand your language, right? Number one, right? They may not like you. They may just not really, they may had a bad day yesterday. They may actually just not understand the concept, and it's moving too quickly. It might be moving too slowly. There are certain people who are more visual learners. There are certain people who are more, tactical, right? Like, at the end of the day, how is it actually scalable or possible by any means to touch every one of those students in terms of education? Like, just from first principles, I'm not even thinking anything scientific or whatever. I'm just thinking, well, everyone learns differently, and you have one person teaching in one way. This can't work, right? On the other end, you can't go ahead and teach children one-on-one indefinitely. I mean, you're going to need, infinite teachers. So this doesn't work either, right? So how do we get this to happen? Well, this is the personalized side of things. And I feel as though the reason why our company works is because we focus on the child first. So I just approached a private school and we had a conversation, right? And so we were talking, and she was telling me about her students, about what they were struggling with, and all these things, right? And I care about that information, but to be honest, I kind of don't really care. I'm like, whatever they're struggling with is secondary to being able to understand what the child actually likes and what they're good at. So really, my only questions are at this point, well, what are they interested in? Do they like soccer? Do they like, who's their favorite soccer player? This has nothing to do with their education, right? But like, who's their favorite soccer player, right? Do you like fashion? Do you like hats? You like hats? Okay, great. Well, what kind of hats do you like? You like fedoras? You like whatever, right? It's like, get the child interested. You're asking, how do you get the children to love it? You have to get them to love their life first. So if we're constantly telling these children that you are not good at this, or if the children think themselves that they're not great at it, and this is one of the issues that I have with diagnoses, the constant diagnoses of these children in terms of what they may have. Listen, I'm okay with doing it, but at the end of the day, the child, it's being reinforced at home. You have ADHD. You can't do this because you have ADHD. You can't do this because you have a learning disability. You can't. So it's like, well, this doesn't make the child feel good about themselves. It doesn't make them feel like they can do anything. It doesn't make them feel like they are good at anything. But at the end of the day, every child has an interest that they are phenomenal at. I have children who can't read anything, but then you start talking to them about like Pokemon cards, and they can tell you what every Pokemon card is worth. They can tell you like all the details. And I'm like, you can't even read. How are you able to retain this information? So what I did with one student, I have two stories. One, and it's funny because I just had this student tonight, earlier when I was kind of teaching, right? He's doing great now. He couldn't read anything. He couldn't read 3-letter words. And now I was so surprised today. He's reading full sentences. He's like, the magician went to the something and put on his magic shoes. I'm like, how did you read that, man? You couldn't even see the word like had and understand what it was. But some of the tactics that I used was actually bringing in the Pokemon cards, because he had a nice, clean, pristine, just booklet of just Pokemon, like hundreds, right? And so I'm like, well, man, you can't just walk around not reading. Like, you got to read this. Otherwise, you're not going to know what they do, right? So we started looking at it and reading it. We started going online and seeing what they were worth, and then comparing it to other things that they were worth. And let me tell you, he was so excited. And yeah, he's struggling with reading, but it's like, we start reading. He's like, oh, I recognize that word from this other thing. So He's enjoying it. This is the love. I'm not even really teaching him yet. Yes, there's book work. Yes, we have to write, right? Yes, we have to do these things. But I'm not even really teaching him. I'm just like, let's just learn about, I want to learn about this. It's about being actually personally invested, because I don't know everything about Pokemon cards. It's like, when I was younger, we used to maybe do it a little bit, but it just wasn't really a thing. But now it's unbelievable. So I think getting into it. And so another story that I have here is I have this one student. She's in grade 6. And it was great because we started talking. And the first question I asked her in the assessment, right, was, well, what are you into? And she said, I like dirt biking. I was like, what? It's like, yeah, I love dirt biking. I love taking apart dirt bikes and putting them back together. And I was just like, all I'm thinking in my head is like, this is going to be a walk in the park then. I don't know anything about dirt biking, right? But what I do know is that if she's that invested in something, I can use that to do anything. So what the mom, she actually approached me. She said, well, I need her to get a little bit better at writing stories and, just doing things like that, expressing herself through words and all these things. So what else am I going to do, right? I opened up one of the workbooks, and instead, and maybe this is something that could work for some of the listeners as well, and those who are teaching. I opened up the workbooks, and yeah, you have the stories in the workbooks, right? I pretty much took the workbook and replaced every word with dirt bike. That's it. And so we're writing stories about dirt biking. That's it. And then you'll just see that she's just writing paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs. And I'm actually invested because I don't know anything about dirt biking. So I want to hear the stories. I want to be engaged in the story. So if it's not engaging, I tell them, hey, can you reword this, please? Because I know that it's more interesting because you're telling me about it right now. Now just write it down. So these are some of the tactics, I guess, that I'm giving away some of the magic, but it's what it is, right? And I think that's what's important and how we can really get the students to love sort of what they're learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've always been a big fan, being in the classroom myself and, going from ninth grade all the way to like fifth and sixth grade. But you're absolutely right. The personalized learning and going back to what you're saying, it is absolutely hard. When you have one teacher, you have 27 kids, sometimes even 32 kids. It just depends on where you're at and, in the school district and so on because of the counts. But you're absolutely right. What you were standing up, where a lot of us being the sage on the stage, and you're going to lose out those kids that are over there in the corners. You're going to lose some kids that are over here on the sides, and then you're only going to reach that small selected few. But that's why I love what you're doing is the fact that by knowing those interests that your students have and weaving them into the subject area, subject matter that they may not feel comfortable with, or they can just feel a little down about, it really does make a big difference. And the fact that you're even introducing or asking them about what their passion is. And so I am a big proponent of that, being able to bring your passion into the classroom and share that with your students, but also have them share their passions can go a long way in helping you as an educator, as a tutor, as a teacher, as anything, to be able to make those connections and with the personalized learning. So I definitely love those stories because I myself have been able to experience that myself in the classroom, and I totally with you, and I absolutely love that in that regard. So kudos to you and the work that you're doing, and obviously those students that you're working with, and are definitely blessed to have somebody like you and the rest of your team to be able to help them out and through the those little tough little tough times during those subjects, but building them up. And I think that that's definitely very important. So another thing to ask that I'm curious about is the impact that this has, obviously providing that personalized learning, but fostering just this great environment of just working together, something that's collaborative. You're going back and forth with your students. So I wanted to ask, is the tutoring that you offer, or the services that you offer, JonAyves, is this strictly one-to-one, or is it sometimes in a small group setting?
So I have no small group settings.
Okay.
And this is very much by design. So my thought process, because of how I've also raised my own children and how I see what happens when two children get into a room with each other, one child is difficult and two children is 5 times as hard. It's not twice as hard. It's 5 times as hard because now, especially if the kids know each other, that's it. You can't do anything. So I think in order to really understand how this works, it needs to be one-to-one. Now, here's the beauty. And I mentioned it earlier. What we have now, and we've just started to roll this out when I was speaking with the private schools, is what we're calling the JonAyves Virtual 15 program. And what this Virtual 15 program is it's a program where we take 15-minute blocks, because this is something that I've tested. Generally, when I'm with students, I'm with them for about half hour. Maybe if they're getting older, it's about 45 minutes, right? But I'm with them for about half hour. 15 minutes of that is random. We're hanging out. 15 minutes of that, the other 15 minutes is actually doing work. But they're learning. I have a 5-year-old, she's in kindergarten, and we are now starting regrouping with addition, double digits. Yeah, she's unbelievable. She came in, she didn't know what number came after the number 1. I'd say, what comes after 1? She's like, I don't know. But she can say her numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. What comes after 1? I don't know. So, okay. So what's happened there is that through these, I call them 15-minute sessions, even though they're 30 minutes in length, we were able to come across and really dig into the details. So now what we're rolling out with this Virtual 15 is, let's just do this virtually. And let's do it during the day, during the school day. I don't want anything after school. Why? Kids' brains are fried. Could you imagine you're going to work 9 to 5 and then you got to go home and watch your kids? It happens. I mean, that's what we have to do, right? But, you go home 9 to 5 and then you have to do more work, right? Like, no. If you're going and you're a child at this point, so you go to school and then you have to go home and do more work. This is not reasonable. So how are we going to battle against this? We can't just keep talking about it and saying that kids needs extra help and we're not doing anything about it. Well, the kids need extra help, so give them the extra help in a very intensified. Remember, I was talking about hyperfocus. We need hyper-focused environments. And what I've learned is that 15 minutes is all you need. So you can do this 1 day a week. My pitch, and that I've seen has worked, because most of my students are 1 day a week and they're learning. The same student who can do double digits, regrouping, 5 years old, it's half hour a week. How is this possible? She doesn't do any homework either. I try to get them to do homework and it just doesn't happen, right? So why is this possible? Well, it's because I bonded with the student, right? She believes me. She believes in me, and she believes that I care about her. And we actually talk about things that she likes. So this is the goal of the Virtual 15, is to do this on Zoom. Okay. Everyone understands what Zoom is like at this point, right? Online virtual sort of anything, right? I mean, we're doing it right now. So to be able to do this with children and to do this with students, whatever the age might be, take 15 minutes. What do you need to learn? You need to learn about interest. I was talking about this earlier. Well, interest is free money. Done. Next class, right? And then we start going into what's simple interest. Well, simple interest, it's not as good as compound interest because, XYZ reasons, right? Then it starts to stick with them. Well, oh man, I only want accounts that have compound interest. So now not only are you addressing the actual, issue of understanding what the concept is, you're applying it to something that is reasonable. And it's in such a small period of time. That's it. And if you just repeat those small pieces of information, listen, that's all I did as a drummer. You sit there, it's the most boring thing ever, by the way. You sit there and you practice your right hand for a long time, and then you practice your left hand for a long time, and then you put them together for a really long time, right? And you have this beep, beep, beep metronome in the background that's just like keeping you in time. Oh my goodness. But it's the repetition that is going to give you the result. Listen, life rewards consistency. It's just what it is. So if you can take these small chunks and really, really invest and ingrain them in your students, which is what we're doing with this 15-minute program. Now I have private schools that are saying, wait, once a week? We want to do this every week, right? We want to do this every day with some of these students. So I'm like, well, sure, right? Why not? Take them out of the class. They're not learning in the class anyway. Take them out of the class, bring them over to us, and we'll have that hyper-focused time with them, because that is more valuable. Think about it. When you go to the gym, right? For those who go to the gym, right? I'm very inconsistent with the gym. I try, but it's what it is. So you're going to the gym. You can work out for 5 hours a day. At the end of the day, those who are experts will tell you that that'll have diminishing returns. if you can get a solid workout in a short period of time that's high intensity, all these HIIT workouts, right? Then you will see results. So why not apply that in other contexts? It's the same thing, right? So this is where I have this normalization theory where everything is the same, right? People may think it's not, but I will firmly believe that everything's the same. Every concept is the same. That's why I've been able to move throughout different industries, because I just apply the same formula into whatever industry I'm doing or a part of to like learn whatever's happening and then just move the thing forward. So have that high level, high intensity in whatever you're learning. So that's sort of one of the things that I think is really interesting about our program here, about how we can just get into the schools and really work with the students and make them love it, right? So they can learn it and live it. And that's it.
That's wonderful. I absolutely love that. And yeah, I mean, you hit on so many great things as far as, again, going back to the personalized learning, a couple things, the hyper focus state. Also, sometimes it's just that cognitive overflow, just like overload, I should say, excuse me, and you're absolutely right. Kids are in school for about 6 hours a day, seven, doing schoolwork. And then on top of that, they want them to do after school, programs and continue whether either the math or the reading and so on. And I'm like thinking to myself, when do these kids get to just be kids when they're, there and just get that additional practice, and then they may not have that support in the afternoon and so on. So I mean, just you hit on so many great things there that are very important for us as educators, and of course in whether schools and our school districts to really think about too as well. We students also need that brain break at the end of the day, and just to be kids and relax. And that's why one of the reasons, like, I don't believe in homework. I never gave any homework at all whatsoever. All my kids, everything was done in class, and it was just 5 problems to practice on. And the fact that I was there and I was able to support them there, help them on any misconceptions, do a quick reteach. And sometimes it was just maybe like a 1 minute, 2 minute little conversation to fix a misconception with a small group. And then we're right back at it at level. And it didn't really take that long for me to see that they had mastered those concepts. But again, it was because it was in that hyper focused state of mind where we did our practice 15, 20 minutes together as a class, or we would do think, pair, share. You're working with your partners and so on. And I mean, it does make a world of a difference. And sometimes we think that by giving them more and more and more reps, that's going to help. But in the end, you're burning the student out. Number two, you can give them reps and reps and reps, but if they're not doing it right to begin with, they're practicing how to do it the wrong way.
Yes.
And we don't think about those things too as well. So I really love what you talked about there. And last question before we kind of start wrapping up, I wanted to talk to you and ask you, with the work that you've been able to do since last year, coming into this year, and what you're seeing, where is it that you would envision JonAyves Learning Club going into, whether it's within this next year, next 3 years, or next 5 years? What is the goal?
Yeah. Oh, it's exciting. So exciting. One thing before I get to that, you were mentioning reps. So I fully believe in reps, right? I fully believe in homework as well. It's just that, like, and you actually, you hit it right on the head. If you're practicing the wrong thing, it's counterintuitive. It's you're spinning your wheels. Reps will always beat out everything. However, if you don't want to do the reps, then chances are you're doing it wrong. And chances are you will do it wrong. So then you may as well just eliminate the reps. And I think that's sort of what the schools are doing, is that they're eliminating it. But here's the problem, is that they're also eliminating it for those who can handle it. Because listen, reps can be built into your children. My kids now, I just send them upstairs and they just do work for half an hour. That's the norm, right? And this is after school, whatever it is, it's the norm. But it's because we've built it in. It wasn't just one day, hey, do all the work all the time. It's like, no, this is a normal thing at this point. So I fully, and again, coming from music, if I didn't put the reps in, I wouldn't have been able to do anything. So I think it's very important. But like you said, if this isn't necessarily possible with, parents commuting to work, with, parents need more money than ever, like percentage wise, to buy a home and to feed their families and all these things. Here in Canada, I mean, food has gone up, I don't know, too much percent within the last year, right?
How can anyone actually afford this? It's not possible. So you got to either get another job or whatever it is, get your side hustle going on, whatever. So do you have time for your kids? Well, you got to put food on the table. So it's very difficult to be in that hyper focused environment. So the fact that you're able to create that in your classroom, that can and does replace that homework aspect, right? So I think that's incredible. So please, kudos to you. It's amazing. In terms of moving forward, oh man, with JonAyves, I can't wait for the next year. I'm so excited. This virtual 15 program is going to be revolutionary. I'm 100% guaranteeing it. I tell my wife all the time, if I can't make this work now, I may as well just get out of creating business, because it's the perfect time in education. Schools are interested in trying to find different ways to become more digital, to become more virtual, to be able to connect with the students more in a way that they understand as well, right? This program over the next, so I would say I'm onboarding schools around probably 2 schools per week at this point. And over the next year, if this continues as such, if not more, oh man, I'm going to be hiring instructors from all over the place. And the next piece is that what we're looking to do is we're looking to, again, have a certification based on our curriculum and our understanding of how to teach the children in order for those to become licensed. And so when you become licensed, that just opens up a whole other gateway, right? So it's super exciting. I can't wait for the next year. Well, I can't wait for tomorrow, to be honest. I can't wait for tonight. I have so much that's on the plate that's like, oh, I can't, we're having this amazing conversation. It's like, man, after this, it's just going to be it's going to be more amazement just every minute of the day. So it's super exciting. It's a lot of work. It's what it is. But to see the success happening and to see the schools onboarding and to see that people are interested in moving this thing forward, it just means that we're at that time for that revolution. And I'm excited to continue it. Can't wait for the next year. Can't wait for the next 5 years. Oh, it's going to be a blast.
And that is exciting. And again, thank you so much for sharing the work that you're doing and of course your story. And for me, just the fact that you are coming in from such various degree backgrounds as far as work, and the fact that you're seeing things through different lenses, I think that to me is just one of the most valuable things, is just learning through those experiences. And then of course seeing, I'm with you on that, like that you mentioned, the fact that you're using the same formula in every aspect and phase that you went through to lead you to this has definitely helped out. And I'm a big proponent of that too as well. But thank you so much, Maxwell, for not only what you're doing with the students, what you're doing through JonAyves, but really just your enthusiasm. I really see your genuineness, authenticity, and the fact that you really truly care about what you're doing, and you're really excited about how you're helping the students that you work with succeed. And that is something that we need more of, just how inspiring you are and inspired you are. So again, thank you so much for what you're doing. I wish you the best in the next week. I wish you the best within the next 3 months and so on, as you continue to build the virtual 15. And definitely very excited to hear how that goes. And so maybe just keep in touch, and maybe we'll do a part 2 of this, and just to see how that's going, because I truly believe that'll be something that'll be wonderful for all, students and schools within your area. And who knows, maybe even expanding, outside of Canada too as well. And we'll see where that goes too. But I love what you're doing. And of course, the personalized aspect of it, very important. So thank you so much for that. But before we wrap up, this is one of my favorite segments to end the show with, which is the last 3 questions. All right. So Maxwell, hopefully you're ready here. And again, going back to that superhero theme, we know that every superhero has an origin story, but we also know that many superheroes also have a weakness. So for Superman, his biggest weakness was kryptonite. So I want to ask you, Maxwell, in the current state of education, what would you say is your current edu kryptonite?
Yeah, amazing. There are a few. And if I were to look at what the biggest one would be, I would have to say it's understanding that I need to win over an entire sector that I have initially not been a part of. This is something that is kind of discouraging for me at times, And I think I found the way around it, which is understanding that there are schools that require, I'm trying to think of a way to put this, but private schools are very interesting. The reason why they're interesting is because there's a fiduciary responsibility from the owners and from the founders to make sure that they're producing results in a way that they're the ones who fund it accept, right? So that kryptonite of, feeling like I am out of control, like I don't have any control over my organization because I have to depend on the schools, has effectively been negated by the fact that I can go to schools that are sort of controlled by the parents, which is fantastic for me, because as an organization, I'm thinking, well, I want the best for the parents and for the kids. So if these schools also want the best for the parents and the kids, and not only, again, all schools want this. However, there's a way that can, think about any private company, right? Private companies who are kind of small can move very quickly. Think about startup companies, right? You just move quickly. You talk to the founder, talk to the CEO, sign some papers, deal's done, right? That's how I feel about private schools. When I think about larger education sectors and whatnot, we have the school boards here in Canada. They're amazing. I went to a Catholic school, right? So, sort of like a public school, whatever it might be. Without that, I don't know where I would be. The fact that the teachers were there, they were consistent. I've never seen a more powerful group of people, more inspired group of people to actually, put the love into their jobs, into the children and all these things. Without these public schools, the world wouldn't be where it is today. There's no question about it. So the problem is that it's kind of slow, right? When you think about anything that is a large entity, it can only move slowly. So that for me, I'm like, man, I can't be in things that are moving slowly right now. I gotta move quickly. So the fact that I was able to find these private schools and actually be able to have those conversations has been fantastic. But still, I know that the Holy Grail is within the kryptonite. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So how do I kind of continue going through? And again, like I'm saying, it's discouraging at times thinking about, wow, I have to crack these schools, and I don't even want to go close to it because it drains my energy. So this is exactly the kryptonite that you're mentioning, that I love public schools and Catholic schools and the public sector and whatnot, but it's very difficult as an organization and for myself to actually work within that because of its properties, such as kryptonite and Superman, right? So I guess that would sort of be one of the things there. Hopefully that doesn't step on anyone's toes and all of that, right? But it's an incredible place to be in, I think, and I value the public sector so much.
Yeah. No, I agree with you on what you mentioned. Oftentimes, and again, being seen as an outsider, but again, it's that mindset, and I guess it's this is the way we've always done it mindset. And I think, like you mentioned, we see slow change, but for somebody like yourself and myself, that sometimes we're like not even 10x, we're like 100x ahead because we already have that vision. And to be in an organization that doesn't see that can be very difficult. And so I completely understand where you're coming from on that. But again, as long as you continue doing what you're doing, and of course, the product speaks for itself. And in this case, also the results that you have for your students will definitely speak loudly for you as well. I'm sure that in the very, very near future, doors will open up and conversations will start, being had that could definitely move, a lot quicker. So definitely looking forward to hearing from that too as well. But thank you for sharing your kryptonite. All right. Question number 2, Maxwell, is if you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
Sure. This one's actually kind of an easy one because I think about it every minute, right? And it's the basis of my education, being in music. It's the basis of the success that I've had within the careers that I've sort of, embarked upon, being from music, heading into the food industry, heading into the tech industry, heading into education and childcare and all these things. I know it's when I list it out, it's always quite a funny thing to me, right? Just the whirlwind of sectors that I've kind of touched on. But at the end of the day, and as I guess hypocritical as sometimes this may sound, right? Because this seems like I'm inconsistent, but and I said it earlier, that life rewards consistency. All I want to see is a black billboard with white writing. That's it. Life rewards consistency, period. This applies to everything that you may do. Like we were mentioning, go to the gym. Listen, you have a podcast, you're running a business, you're taking care of your children, you're maintaining friendships, you're say you're a religious person, you're embarking on that journey, meditation. It doesn't matter what it is. You will be rewarded for your consistency. And I think I want all the shirts made. I might get it branded on my suit here, the whole thing, right? So that's my billboard, 100%.
I love it. I love it. And I'm a big, again, believer in consistency as well. As you mentioned, doing the podcast and just being very consistent with that definitely has been very rewarding. And the fact that I've got to meet wonderful educators such as yourself, entrepreneurs as yourself, musicians as yourself, and of course, bakers as yourself. And, it's just been amazing. So yeah, consistency is key. Absolutely love that. All right. The last question, Maxwell, is the following is, if you can try out a job for a day just to see if you like it, what job might you choose?
What job might I choose? So one thing that I've always wanted to do is I've always wanted to be a pilot. And there's something very interesting about it, because now assuming that I already got my however many hours you need to become a pilot, right? Being able to hop into that chair for a moment and having complete control over in a space that is, it's scientifically, we understand what's going on in the air and all of these things, right? But at the end of the day, what's holding you up? What is I'm not a scientist. Yes, I can probably understand how, airflow works and all these things, right? But at the end of the day, it's not my strength, right? I didn't do any chemistry, all this stuff, and left it behind. So at the end of the day, it's like, how? But I'm here and we're flying. I've been on so many flights over the years, and I'm just always thinking, I loved going up to see the cockpit, right? I'd go up and it's like, oh, wow, this looks amazing. There's all these dials and it's like all these things. It's great. But to be a pilot and to just have that control over your own destiny in an unknown environment, man, that would be the one thing that I would always love to. And hey, it may happen, right? Who knows?
Yeah.
Could be the next thing.
It could be. You never know. Well, Maxwell, I want to say again, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate, again, just your genuineness, your passion, and the work that you're doing. And of course, again, like I mentioned to you, once you're a guest on the My EdTech Life show, you definitely have an open invite. So hopefully within maybe, I don't know, I want to say 3 months, 5 months, or a year, whenever this takes off, because I know it will. And especially with somebody like you behind the helm, being the pilot of this great plane that is JonAyves Academy, and taking it to where you're taking it right now. I'm really excited about what the future is going to bring. And thank you again for your service here in the education space. And thank you so much for sharing your inspiring story with us tonight, this evening. So again, my friends, as always, too, please make sure that you go by our website so you can check out this amazing episode on the replay, or you can check out the other 204 episodes of My EdTech Life, where you will meet enthusiastic educators, creators such as Maxwell from our education space that you can take knowledge nuggets from and sprinkle them on to what you are already doing great. So please make sure you stop by our website. Please make sure you follow us on all socials at myedtech.live, or actually, excuse me, at My EdTech Life on all socials. Make sure you give us subscribe to us, give us a thumbs up, give us a follow, guys. We would love to be part of your day, be part of your feed, of your listening pleasure, your viewing pleasure, so you can go ahead and get inspired as well. And if you would love to support our mission of connecting educators and creators one show at a time, please stop by our merch store, which is located there on our website as well, where you can get yourself some My EdTech Life merch, such as caps, sweaters, shirts, and as always, all of that goes back into the show so we can continue bringing you some amazing and wonderful conversations. Always, my friends. And as always, again, don't forget, stay techie.